On this news review, it's almost a year since U.S. President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew Washington from the nuclear deal between Iran and the 5+1 group of countries. The move was followed by Washington's maximum pressure campaign on Iran that has already led to the reimposition of sanctions that had been removed under the nuclear deal. Here's a report.
The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was reached in 2015, following years of negotiations between Iran and the P5+1 group of countries. Under the nuclear deal, Iran agreed to put limits on its nuclear program in exchange for the removal of nuclear-related sanctions. But last year, on May 8th, President Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the Iran nuclear deal. The unilateral move was followed by more violations. The withdrawal meant the return of sanctions the U.S. had imposed on the Islamic Republic, and 3 months later, the first part of those sanctions on Iran came into full effect. Last November, the U.S. reinstated the second round of sanctions, including a ban on Iran's oil sales. Washington issued 6-month waivers to 8 countries to import Iranian crude, but those waivers too expired earlier this month, with the U.S. pledging not to reissue them. Recently, the U.S. has come up with another anti-Iran measure, imposing sanctions on enriched uranium exports that were allowed under the 2015 nuclear deal. Washington's move to leave the Iran deal was part of a series of unilateral withdrawals from international treaties and organizations by the Trump administration. Just days after assuming office in 2017, Trump delivered on a campaign promise and announced that the U.S. would be pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was followed by Washington's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement, NAFTA, UNESCO, UN Human Rights Council, etc., etc. Other signatories to the JCPOA slammed Washington's decision to abandon the agreement, which was endorsed by a UN Security Council resolution. They have vowed to keep to work the accord alive. One of these efforts is a non-dollar payment channel known as Instex. The UK, France and Germany unveiled Instex in late January to protect their companies against US sanctions and enable them to continue trade with Iran. But as the US exerts more pressure and imposes bans on legal international transactions with Iran, the country has called on the JCPOA signatories to do more to save the deal. With the Iranian nation expecting further government reaction, Tehran has reminded the world that authorities are considering their numerous options, including leaving the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Well, joining us on this edition of the News Review, we've got Salmati Torabi, Director Rissalat Strategic Studies Institute, joining us from Rome, and also Editor of Politics First, Mr. Marcus Papadopoulos, joining us from the British capital, London. Let's start off with our guest in London, Dr. Papadopoulos. It's almost a year now since the United States reneged on its position with regards to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Let's focus on the response that the Europeans have had with regards to the continuation of the JCPOA and how they fared over the past year and with the promises that they've made and assurance that they made for Iran.
Well, the JCPOA has done much to foster both security and stability in the Middle East. And I applaud Iran for continuing to comply fully with the agreement. And I applaud Britain, France and Germany for remaining signatories to the agreement, despite the immense pressure coming on them from Washington. Now, Britain, Germany and France have made it very clear, indeed categorically clear, that they continue to support the JCPOA and that they are not going to pull out. And indeed, Paris and Berlin have said that they will continue to trade with Iran and continue to invest in Iran. The problem, however, is that at some point, I do believe that France, Germany and Britain could end up buckling under the pressure from America, because the American government is saying privately and in no uncertain terms that if these countries continue to trade with Iran, then they are going to jeopardize their access to the American market. The JCPOA, as I said earlier, has done much for security and stability in the Middle East. But if you are Mr. Trump, then the agreement poses a problem for you, because Mr. Trump has a visceral disliking of Iran and indeed all things Iranian, and he wanted to be free to place sanctions on Iran in order to try and asphyxiate the Iranian economy with the aim of bringing down the Iranian government and destroying the Iranian revolution. But also, Mr. Trump is beholden to Israel and Saudi Arabia. Both countries played a very important role in his election victory in 2016. So Mr. Trump had to pull America out of the JCPOA in order to satisfy Tel Aviv and Riyadh.
All right, let's bring in Samati Torabi, who's with us on the line from Qom. Mr. Torabi, last year, U.S. President Donald Trump turned his back on the JCPOA. United Nations Security Council ratified agreement. What has this done in terms of the United States' reliability in the international community? We've already heard it on a number of occasions from Iranian officials that the United States can never be trusted again.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, I think this is actually not the main issue. The main issue is that you have two views in the United States about how to deal with Iran. One is a long-term view, which is what the Obama administration was pursuing. And having the nuclear deal, the JCPOA, was part of that deal, part of that view of how to deal with Iran. The other view was the view that's represented by the Trump administration, which is one that wants to get rid of the revolution and get rid of the Islamic Republic as it is in the short term. So the goal of both of them is the same. They both want to end the revolution, end the Islamic Republic, end Iran as a country which is independent. One of them wanted to proceed with the long term, halt the nuclear development of Iran, wait for a different supreme leader. And these things were clearly stated by Obama, by Kerry, by Hillary Clinton at that time. They were buying time until the 2025, 2026, to then do what the Trump administration is doing actually today. So in a way, it's actually not bad for everyone in the region and for people in Iran and the world that these things are happening, because it's actually showing what the actual goal and what actually America is after with Iran. And in this situation, actually, Iran is looking pretty good in this situation. As your other guest was mentioning, Iran proved its goodwill, proved that it's willing to sit together with everyone and come up with a solution. But as the leader had said at the beginning of this whole process, this will be an experience that, will once again prove that the West is unreliable, that the Americans are unreliable, and that the Europeans are unreliable. And actually, the fact that the British or the French or the Germans are still in it is really not that big of a deal. In practice, they have really done nothing. It's just a signature on a paper, and you can't really see them in practice doing anything that they were supposed to do under the agreement. So as far as I'm concerned, the sooner this process comes to an end and America and Europe behave the way they want to, and they really is their real goal, the sooner Iran will be able to make the decisions it needs to make about its future, whether it relates to restarting everything that related to the nuclear program, and whether it relates to how it really wants to deal with the Europeans in the future.
All right, thanks a lot. Director of the Risalat Strategic Studies Institute, Samati Torabi, joining us from Qom, and also thanks to our guests in London, editor of Politics First, Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos. And with that, it brings us to an end here on this edition of Press TV's News Review. Stay tuned, though. There's plenty more to come here on Press TV. Bye for now.